Hey guys, what's up? It's Alex or Nuznuz here, and welcome to my Nex solo guide for beginners. This guide is going to aim to show you everything you need to know to get your first Nex kill, and I'll also provide you some more advanced tactics later on in the guide. So first we're going to start this guide with telling you about my credibility. I do this with all my guides so you know I actually have experience with the boss I'm making the guide on. For Nex, I have over 800 kills, and almost all of these kills have been done solo. I'm around 75% done with the log, so I have some pretty decent experience at Nex with some pretty good kill times. So first we'll start with the required stats to be able to access and kill Nex. You'll need level 70 Constitution, level 70 Ranged, level 70 Strength, and level 70 Agility. This is because you'll need these stats to get the Frozen Key to access Nex, which we will talk about later, and you also will need to have access to the God Wars dungeon. As for recommended stats for actually soloing Nex, I would recommend 90 plus combat stats, also 95 prayer with curses unlocked for soul split and turmoils, then having 96 herblore for the use of overloads and adrenaline potions is extremely useful, and then finally 68 summoning for a tortoise or 87 summoning for a nihil is highly recommended. I would also recommend at least tier 80 weapons and tier 80 armor. This will be your best bet to be able to solo consistently. So now we're going to go over some basic info about Nex. So Nex is a boss that's level 1001 combat and has 200k life points. Nex is poison immune, so Cinderbanes and weapon poison won't work here. Nex is also stun immune, so stunning Nex won't do you any good. Nex does consist of 5 different phases and also has 4 minions that you'll need to kill to proceed during the fight. Nex is primarily killed with ranged because Nex does use protection prayers, and if you go in an instance you're able to make it so Nex never uses the ranged protection prayer, so that makes you able to kill Nex consistently with ranged, and with a different style it just isn't very viable. So Nex is located in the God Wars dungeon in the Ancient Prison, which you need to have a Frozen Key to access. The Frozen Key is used to open the frozen door leading to the Ancient Prison and can be obtained by getting 4 parts of the key. These parts are each dropped by 1 minion of the 4 gods in the God Wars dungeon. This means that you'll need to kill the God Wars minions for all 4 bosses to get the key pieces. However, these key pieces can only be obtained in the Stronghold room. So for instance, you must kill Bandos minions in the Bandos Stronghold after hitting the door with a hammer. You can't kill the minions in the big main God Wars room. Now after you have all 4 pieces, you'll need to have completed the dig site quest to put the key together, and once you make it, you have 10 charges and then you can enter the Ancient Prison. However, this key can also hold up to 100 charges, and you can repair this key by Bob at Lumbridge. It costs anywhere from 10k to 49k per charge depending on your smithing level. To enter the next room, you must also be wearing full ancient ceremonial robes and have your Frozen Key with you. These robes can be purchased from the Grand Exchange, but if you're an Iron Man, you'll need to get Nex kill count and then obtain the robes for yourself. Now, one of the best unlocks you can get is the ability to use the bank area permanently without needing to bring your Frozen Key, keep it recharged, or bring ancient ceremonial. This is an amazing quality of life thing that keeps you from having to put on your ancient ceremonial, get your Frozen Key every time you go to the bank and fight Nex. So to get this, you'll talk to the lady at the Nex bank and you'll need to pay them a full set of ancient ceremonial robes, your Frozen Key, and 10 million GP. This is very, very worth it though, so if you're on the fence, I say you should totally do it. So next we're going to look at the notable loot. Now Nex drops a lot of unique items. She drops tier 80 armor such as Virtus, Pernix, and Torva, and also weapons like the Zarite bow, Virtus wand, and book. The most notable drops are the Torva plate body and Torva plate legs, which go for well over 100 mil each. Since Nex drops so many items, it's common to get a unique here, as the rate for getting any piece of Nex equipment is every 1 in 21 kills, meaning you can expect frequent drops at Nex. Alright, so next we're going to look at the best familiars to use at Nex. So Nex is a very accuracy dependent boss, as you have very low accuracy there, so anything you can use to boost your accuracy is a must have. So a Nihil is by far the best familiar you can bring to Nex, so this is what I highly recommend you use Strive to be able to use. However, I know when learning Nex it can be a bit hard, so using a Beast of Burden to learn the mechanics and get your first kills is absolutely fine. As for auras, like previously stated, accuracy is a big focus, so using the Reckless aura is very good. You can also get by with the Supreme Sharpshooter aura, however, Reckless is by far the best there. I wouldn't really recommend any other aura rather than these two because the accuracy is just so important. Finally, I'm going to go over some priority items and gear upgrades. This is just going to list things that will help make a big difference at Nex. You don't need to have all or any of these, some of them can make a huge difference though. I'll list some more expensive upgrades as well. Those are just because they're really good here, but they're definitely not at all needed. So for the lower tier items, having a Reaper necklace is probably the best upgrade you can get here, as this will increase your accuracy greatly, and coupled with a good aura and Nihil, it will make Nex so much easier to hit and kill. Fleeting boots are also very useful at Nex, as you're moving quite a bit, so having these to be able to rapid fire while moving is really good. And the Illuminated Book of Law is also extremely good for helping to kill the minions fast, and it will just speed up your kills altogether. As for the more advanced items, the Eldritch Crossbow and Greater Ricochet ability are very overpowered here, as the Eldritch Crossbow special attack coupled with Greater Ricochet and Soul Split can help clear the minions in basically one ability, and this is just all around super overpowered at Nex. Alright, so now we're going to go over the gear setup, so we're going to start with the beginner setup. Now you don't have to go with this exact setup, I'll give some alternatives, but we'll go through it real fast. So first, we have Armadillo armor. You can use Pernix. I wouldn't go less than Armadillo, but you can use something like Pernix, Elite Robin Hood, Serenic, of course, if you have it. And then for our pocket slot, obviously the Illuminated Book of Law that I touched on earlier is really good. And then a Reaper necklace as your necklace. You probably should have this. It's really good, even in a beginner setup, but you could use something like a Blood Amulet of Fury or a Farsight Sniper necklace. And then, of course, for the cape, we have the ranged Fight Kiln cape. You can also use the new Zuck cape, you can use a skill cape, you can use a max cape, basically whatever you want here. Then for weapon, we have the Wyvern crossbow so that we can use Becriminal bolts. You can use chaotic crossbows as well, so then you can also use Becriminal bolts, or I guess you can use a royal crossbow, but I really wouldn't go less than that. So next we have Becriminal bolts. I would recommend ruby Becriminal bolts for hitting easier and doing more damage, but also you could bring a diamond Becriminal bolt switch because it allows you to hit easier on Nex. And then another very useful Becriminal bolt, especially for beginners, is Onyx Becriminal bolts. These will allow you to heal while fighting Nex. This is because when the bolts proc, they will heal you, so this can be a good substitute if you're struggling on food, maybe using a Nihil. These could really help you maintain that health. Then we have Ascension grips. Of course, it's just a cheap option. You can use something like Armadillo gloves. You can use Nightmare gauntlets, would probably be the ideal thing, but basically whatever you have for this slot. And then fleeting boots. If you don't have fleeting boots, you can use something like Pernix boots or Armadillo boots, but fleeting boots are very useful like I talked about earlier. And then for the ring slot, you can use a Ring of Vigor if you don't have a Ring of Death. If you have a Ring of Death, of course, that would be better, and then you switch to your Ring of Vigor, so either of those works. Asylum Surgeon's Ring, basically whatever you have here. Now moving on to the inventories, they are going to be pretty similar for both these setups. So for the beginner setup, we have overloads, use the best ones you can. We have Enhanced Excalibur, a shield switch, then we have the Onyx Becriminal bolts that I talked about earlier. We have an Adrenaline potion, use the best Adrenaline potions that you can. Magic Notepaper is very useful at Nex. The reason this notepaper is so useful is because Nex drops a lot of brews and restores as a drop, which is like 30+ items. So having this notepaper allows you to note those and not let it go to waste, because those actually add up quite a bit. Then we have the Power Burst of Vitality potion, which is really nice to have to deal with the ice phase of Nex, which we'll go into later, but that's a really good thing to have in your inventory. Then we have the Ring of Vigor that you can switch to if you are using a Ring of Death or a different ring. And then we have a Planted Feet switch. You don't actually need this because you're probably not going to be using Death Swiftness that much, but I usually bring it on all my presets, and if you ever do end up needing to use it, then you'll have it. And then of course Sailfish, or you can use Blubbers, or a mix of both work pretty well. Ceridome and Bruise, and then Super Restores. Now if we move on to the advanced range setup, we have normal or elite Serenic, and then we have an Essence of Finality with a Debo is what I have. SGB isn't that great here. Then we have the Zuck range cape. You can use basically whatever cape you have. Pernix Quiver, which I will usually bring Hydrix bolts and Ruby bolts if I'm using this high level level setup doing Nex with Annihil, and I'm pretty experienced, so Hydrix and Ruby is how I go. And then we have an Eldritch Crossbow, which is extremely overpowered here because of the spec. Of course, if you have your Eldritch Crossbow in an Essence of Finality, you can bring that, and then whatever dual wield weapons you bring. Then we have Fleeting Boots and Nightmare Gauntlets or Enhanced Nightmare Gauntlets, and then we have the Ring of Death and of course the Illuminated God Book. As for our inventory, it's pretty similar to the beginner setup. We have Elder Overloads though, and then we have an Enhanced Excalibur, a Shield Switch, Ring of Vigor, Adrenaline Renewal Potions, Vitality Pot, again the Plated Feet, the Magic Notepaper, and then you can bring Sailfish or Blue Blubber Jellyfish, or you can just bring all Blue Blubber Jellyfish if you feel confident enough, Vulnerability Bombs to Vulnex, and then Ceridome and Bruise and Super Restores. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is an optional strategy. This is not optimal at all for DPS or killing Nex, but if you're a beginner, this could be worth it if you're struggling. On the Shadow phase, which is the second phase of Nex, if you're ranging, which you will be using this guide, Nex will go melee distance and deal rapid damage to you sometimes during this phase. Most players will surge away to get out of melee distance, or kite Nex around, or just DPS her down really fast and finish the phase while tanking the damage, but Nex can sometimes come back in melee distance, and if your kills are long or you don't have great DPS, this could deal a lot of damage to you. If you want to avoid this completely, you can bring a melee helmet and boots or melee armor to switch to, some pieces of that, so you can wear it during the fight and then switch off after the shadow phase. This will make it so Nex won't camp melee distance, and it's something less that you have to deal with when learning. However, it is kind of annoying to bring this switch and remember to switch back off of it, and it does decrease your DPS quite a bit for that phase. So it's just an optional thing I thought I'd mention. So I forgot to mention it in the inventory setup, but you can bring an anti-poison because Nex can poison you. Me personally, it doesn't hurt too much, so I tend to just tank it and not bring one, but bring one can be a very good idea, especially if you're just starting out. So to start off, I'll tell you about the basics of Nex. So Nex has 5 phases, and you'll move through different parts of the arena and kill a minion to complete each phase. You need to kill the minion in each corner of the room after a phase ends to move on to the next one. First though, you'll need to phase Nex's health, and then she will call out to her minion. You'll then be able to kill that minion, attack Nex, and move on to the next phase. Nex can use all 3 deflect curses, but she can only use 2 of them each kill. A way to make it so Nex never uses Protect from ranged is using an instance. If you make and buy an instance, then Nex will never use ranged protection prayers on the first kill. Then after you finish your first kill, you need to teleport out, bank, come back, and you'll be able to freely kill Nex without having to worry at all about her using ranged deflect prayer. Nex attacks with mage for the majority of the fight, so Protect from magic is highly recommended. However, she will occasionally move in to melee you. It's usually best to keep Protect from magic on and run out of distance, and Nex should go back to attacking you with magic. Nex will also use ranged during the shadow phase. So now we're going to move on to phase 1. This is called the smoke phase. During this phase, Nex will do 5 auto attacks and then do a special. On this phase, Nex has a soft cap that reduces damage above 5,000 by 50%. You'll notice this throughout the fight. Here are the special attacks that you'll have to deal with during this phase. The first special attack is the Choke Special, which Nex will shout, "Let the virus flow through you," and you may start coughing. This will drain your combat stats, although your Overload or Super Restores should easily counteract this. So next we have the Smoke Bullet. Nex will stop attacking you and say, "There is." She will then raise her wings, and a few seconds later she will say, "No escape," and she will fly down the middle of the arena, damaging you 5,000 typeless damage and disabling your prayer if you're in her way. This attack is very easy to avoid. Just make sure you're not at all in the corridor when Nex uses this attack, and it will not hit you at all. Just make sure you're on the outer edges. Finally, Nex can also use the drag attack during this phase. Nex's magic hits have a chance to drag a player towards her and stun and bind them and disable your protection prayers. The easiest way to avoid this is to try to keep anticipation up, and then you can use freedom if you're dragged to get free. You'll need to deal 40k damage to move on to the next phase. After you deal 40k damage, Nex will call out to her minion, and you'll need to kill Fumis. After this, you'll attack Nex and move on to the next phase. Here's an example example of phase 1 with an attack rotation written below, and I'll walk you through it. Alright, so now I'm going to show you a real-time phase 1 that I did. So basically the mechanics are shown at the bottom of the screen. You got choke, 5 autos, no escape, 5 autos, and repeat. Keep in mind Nex can also drag you with the magic hit at any time. So when Nex does the there is, I walk out of the way, out of the arena, and it won't hit me. Then I just get back onto Nex and keep damaging Nex. Basically, I'm also keeping Anticipate up when I can. I'm still splitting here. I really shouldn't be, but I'm trying to flick it. And then I need to get Nex to 160k, and now it's time to kill the minion. So it shouldn't take you that long. And when you go to kill the minion is damage capped, so you can't do over like a certain amount of damage, like 1100 or something. So make sure you use bleeds. You should use rapid fire, greater ricochet. Do not use any high damaging abilities because they won't really do anything. And there, that is phase 1. Alright, so next we're going on to the shadow phase. So the new mechanics you'll be dealing with this phase is first the shadow traps, which cause a shadow to appear underneath you. These shadows will deal damage to you 2 ticks after being set underneath you, and they deal 50% of your maximum health as damage, so they hit quite high. The easiest way to avoid these is to just step away. Right when you see the shadow appear under you, just click away. You'll also know this attack is coming by what Nex says, or just by looking underneath you for the shadow. Next we have the Embrace Darkness special, which Nex will yell Embrace Darkness and turn the room into a shadow for anyone within 15 spaces of her. This is the attack that you need to make sure you stay at a melee range of Nex. If Nex is in melee distance of you, you'll need to surge away or kite Nex around the room. Or as a beginner, you can use the melee items that I talked about earlier to prevent Nex from going in melee distance of you. Because if you're in melee distance, you'll be dealt 400 to 700 damage every tick, which can easily kill you. So now let's go over the phase. The pattern is listed below. Nex does shadow traps if you phase her before the choke special, but if you don't, they'll start with darkness. So then we have darkness, shadow traps again, then 4 auto attacks, then this repeats from the second set of shadow traps, so you'll just be dealing with auto attacks and shadow traps after this. Alright, so for this phase, we're basically focusing on avoiding the shadow traps as much as we can. We see the Embrace Darkness, and then comes the Fear the Shadow, so we walk away, and then we continue damaging Nex. Now Nex could come in melee distance, and that would be bad. That is when we have to surge away. If we have the melee item, she won't, but for most people that are experienced with solo, usually kite Nex around when she goes in melee distance like she is now. So here comes Nex in melee distance, so I end up walking away to try to get her out of melee distance. She does the Fear the Shadow, and now she comes and she's doing damage to me, but I end up getting away. At this point, I phased her health. I surged away so she doesn't stay in melee distance. Sometimes she will, and you'll need to surge again. However, it didn't happen at this point, so we end up killing the minion, and that's the phase. Now keep in mind, this is where a lot of people struggle. If she does go in melee distance and refuses to get out, you can surge away, and then if you have the mobile perk, you can surge again. Going around a corner can also help to avoid this, and then also you can try to kite Nex around. For me, in that situation, usually I just eat up my food while killing the minion and try to tank it, but that's not the best idea if you're a beginner. So it takes a bit of experience and learning to know how to deal with that, but after you get it down, it should be pretty easy. Something else I want to mention that you can do is you can just walk around by basically running and spam clicking around, and if you're clicking your abilities at the same time, this is how you're kiting Nex around. So you're running around constantly and also clicking your abilities, and this will allow you to basically damage Nex while kiting her around and not taking damage from the melee distance special. So now we've moved on to the blood phase. This is the phase that most people have the most trouble with. So the new mechanics you'll be doing during this phase is first the blood siphon. Next we'll start off by yelling a Siphon will solve this and summon 2 blood Reavers while raising her arms and performing an animation. If you attack her during this, she will heal, so do not attack her while she's doing this siphon. I want to mention it's also possible to time a snipe, so when she's done siphoning, the snipe will hit her right as the blood phase starts. So basically, to time this, you want to click your snipe ability right when her arms kind of raise up and are out. That's how I kind of remember it. It'll take you a little bit to get the timing down, but this can help get a little more damage in. After this, we have the Blood Sacrifice special. During this phase, after the Siphon and 3 auto attacks, Nex will do the Blood Sacrifice. You'll end up having your character glowing red, and if you don't move 7 spaces away within 4 seconds, she will heal equal to your maximum health, and also damage you for 10% of your maximum health. This is a big special attack that you need to avoid, and if not avoided, it can heal Nex a ton and end up making your blood phase take much longer, or just making you fail it entirely. The easiest way to avoid this is to start running away when you glow red, and then surge away. This will allow you to easily clear this special. You can also switch to Bladed Dive if you want, but I prefer just surging away. If you're fast enough or you don't have surge on cooldown, you can also just run away depending on where Nex is standing, but I like surging just for that extra safety of clearing the special. Also, a very important thing to note about this phase is Nex will heal by bleeds during this entire phase. This is very important, especially for all you Revolution users. So Nex will heal from any bleeds put onto her instead of damaging her. So whatever you do, do not use any abilities that bleed Nex. If that means taking your bleeds off of your ability bar entirely, or just putting them later down the line in your Revolution bar, you should do that, because bleeding Nex is going to make this phase 10 times harder than it needs to be. Alright, so now we're going to move on to the blood phase, and the specs are listed below. This first example I'm going to show you is of a high level, very fast blood phase without even taking a single blood sacrifice. As you see, Nex is already phased when I get the sacrifice. So once you get really good, you can do it like that if you have the right gear, but this is an example of me using high level gear but a more slower phase. So as you can see, I do the little snipe trick that I'm showing here, where I snipe at the right time, so then it goes off right when Nex is done healing, and then we're just damaging Nex. Now I'm not doing as much damage here as you can see, so we are going to get the blood sacrifice, so you'll see me clear that in just a minute. But yeah, I accidentally healed her there with a bleed, which is something you do not want to do. But then I surge here, and then right after I clear the sacrifice, I go right back on Nex. Now, time is very precious during the blood phase, so you want to get back on Nex as soon as you can after the blood sacrifice. And here, I believe I use a Debo to finish Nex off and phase her before she siphons again. So that is another example of a one cycle where you don't have to deal with the siphon or anything like that. Now, if you're struggling on the blood phase, something you can do is use something like Onslaught. So as you'll see here, I'm in budget gear here. I believe I have a Royal Crossbow, maybe, and I have Pernix, and what I do is I Vuln Bomb Nex, get up to full adrenaline, and then right when the blood phase starts, I end up onslaughting. And basically for this, I end up just tanking the blood sacrifice so I can get more hits in. So I just sit here while the blood sacrifice hits me and heals Nex. And then I get a good few bit more hits in here, as you can see, and we get Nex to around 95, 89k, and then we just need to do a few more hits, but Nex does manage to get off the Siphon. So if you don't phase Nex right away and she siphons again, do not panic. What you can do in this situation, you can actually kill the Reavers to stop Nex from siphoning as much health next time she siphons. What I do here is I see the health is 106k, so I think I'm easily going to be able to get her through to 80k health, so I don't panic during the second siphon, and I go back to my damage rotation, and then I get the blood sacrifice, and I end up actually failing the surge here, so Nex heals. But as you can see, we have plenty of time, and I end up being able to actually phase Nex here pretty easily. So if you cannot deal enough DPS and you've tried Onslaught, you've tried your normal damage rotation, you've tried the snipe trick, if you just can't get the DPS and Nex is just healing way too much, what you can do is when Nex starts to siphon, she'll summon the Blood Reavers. So basically you want to go and you want to kill the Blood Reavers. After you kill the Blood Reavers, damage Nex, make sure to avoid the blood sacrifice, and then just repeat this over and over again, and Nex isn't going to be able to heal that much since you're killing the Blood Reavers, since you're avoiding the blood sacrifice, and this is your best bet for slowly getting through the blood phase if you can't deal enough DPS to do it in 1 or 2 cycles. So the next phase we're moving on to is the ice phase, another phase that people have a lot of trouble with, but it's actually much easier than you think. The first mechanic you'll deal with during this phase is the ice prison. Nex will yell "Die now" in a prison of ice, and then you'll become trapped in an ice prison, stunned and bound, and have no protection prayers for 6 seconds. The ice will then shatter and deal you 6,000 to 8,000 2000 hard typeless damage. If you're not broken out of the prison, this will happen, which since you're solo, you won't be able to have anybody break you out. So the easiest way to deal with this big hit is to first use the Power Burst of Vitality potion that I talked about earlier. You'll first want to either anticipate before the prison comes to avoid getting stunned, or freedom once you get trapped in the prison to break out of the stun. After this, you want to drink your Power Burst potion and make sure you're full health as well, and it will raise your health and essentially make you easily be able to survive the prison. If you don't have the Vitality potion on cooldown, there are a bunch of other ways you can deal with this prison. So the first is to barricade. This will avoid all damage. It's probably the safest way, but it costs a lot of adrenaline, which is why most people don't do it. You can also use resonance to resonance the auto attack that comes after the prison hit. So you can't actually resonance the prison hit, but Nex usually puts an auto attack on you after it, so you'll be able to resonance that and kind of counteract a bit of that hit, and then if you eat, you'll probably be just fine. So you should do whatever is easiest for you. I would recommend the Power Burst of Vitality on the first prison you get, since it's the easiest thing to use, and then if you need to take more prisons throughout the phase, you can use the other methods as well and just cycle through them. So next we have the Contain This special attack. Nex will raise her arms and slam them down and put 4 icicles around her. If you're near her, you will take 3500 hard typeless damage, be stunned, and lose your protection prayers. So to avoid this attack, it's pretty simple. You can just run away from it, or you can surge away. Nex will sometimes follow you and kind of be right up on you when she uses this. If that's the case, surging away is much safer. I personally like to surge when avoiding this attack. So I first want to start off the ice phase. Before showing you the full ice phase is just talking about the first special attack you'll deal with. So the first special attack you deal with during the ice phase depends on the last special attack that happened during the blood phase. So for instance, if you got the Siphon last on the blood phase before phasing Nex, then that means you'll get the prison as your first special attack of the ice phase, and then you'll get Contain This as your second special attack. Same goes for the blood sacrifice. If blood sacrifice was your last special attack on the blood phase, then you'll get Contain This as your first special attack on the ice phase and the prison as the second. So now we'll get into the full phase and you'll be able to see the rotation on the screen at the bottom. So now for a look at the ice phase. So of course after every phase you have to kill the Nex minions, so we'll be killing the Nex minion here first to enter the phase. So after we kill the minion, we then need to attack Nex. You can sometimes wait if you want to force a special attack. I could have waited to get the blood sacrifice to then force Contain This to come first, but I said, meh, I'd rather just deal with what I have to deal with. So first we get the ice prison, so I freedom, drink my Power Burst of Vitality, and then tank that, eat up, and then get back on Nex. I don't have protection prayers right now just because they went off, but I throw on Soul Split, and then I should be able to put protection prayers back. So now we're just damaging Nex, and Nex does Contain This, and I actually surge too late, so I get stunned by that, but we have phased Nex's health now, and now we're moving on to Glacies. Now I am going to get an ice prison, and you'll probably get a second ice prison, more than likely when you're learning. So here we get the prison, and I had Anticipate up, so what I do is I Resonance since I don't have Power Burst of Vitality. I heal that 3k but get hit 6k, I eat up, and then I finish killing the minion, and then we're back on Nex. Now you might not be able to do this phase as fast as me. You might end up taking 3 ice prisons, but the strategy remains the same. You should always usually have Resonance to be able to use on the ice prison. You probably won't have the Power Burst of Vitality that often other than the first prison unless you're taking a lot of prisons, but this phase is basically just try to deal as much damage as you can. That's basically the whole Nex fight. You can bleed Nex and run her around, especially during the Contain This, and yeah, it takes a little bit to get used to, but the ice prison isn't as scary as you think. So now we're going to move on to the final phase, the Zaros phase. During this phase, there's not too many mechanics. Nex uses Turmoil and Soul Split and also protection prayers, but she shouldn't use the range protection prayer if you're in an instance and it's your first kill, so there's nothing to worry about with those. She'll attack you with both melee and magic, and during this phase she can also heal with Soul Split, but also has a damage cap which makes all damage above 2000 reduced by 75%. 25%, which is a very big reduction. So the general strategy for this phase is you don't want to use many high damaging abilities, and you want to focus on using things that hit a lot. So bleeds are very, very good. Rapid fire, Deadshot is also really, really good here. You don't want to use anything like Death Swiftness, Tendrils, Debo Spec, because it's not really going to do much as they're high hitting abilities or abilities that increase your damage, and since Nex has his soft cap, it's not optimal. So you can run around if you'd like during this phase while praying protect from magic and staying at a melee distance using devotion, things like that to avoid taking too much damage, but for the most part, for DPSing and doing the most damage and killing Nex as fast as possible, standing within melee distance, praying magic, and getting those Armadillo book procs, walking Nex when you bleed her, and using things like Deadshot is going to make this phase go by really fast, but either of the methods work, and running around with Protect Magic might be better if you are a beginner. So if you're getting hit too much, you can use Debilitate or Devotion to help you out as well, and you can use Reflect too if you really, really need it. Here's an example of a rotation via the RuneScape wiki that is actually really good for learning this phase. The use of bleeds, Deadshot, and Rapid Fire is going to really help you deal damage very, very fast. Also, you need to be aware when Nex is killed, she will explode and use the Wrath Prayer, dealing damage to you if you're near her. So when you kill Nex, make sure you walk a few steps outside of distance so you don't get attacked. So let's get into the last phase example now. So here's an example of the Zaros phase of me doing it. So basically I start off with a Rapid Fire. So I use Rapid Fire and then I go directly into something like Greater Ricochet. Then I bleed Nex and I walk under Nex when I bleed her. At this point, it would be best to use something like Deadshot if you can get enough adrenaline, or you can even start out with the Deadshot as well. And as you can see, the damage is quite big and Nex ends up going down pretty fast. So this phase is basically all about practice, trying to find an ability rotation that works the best for you. I'll leave a link in the description to the PVME Discord that shows different rotations for whether you're a beginner, you're advanced, you're using an Eldritch Crossbow, so you can see a bunch of different rotations and find the one that works the best for you. Like I said, you could use the strategy of running around while praying magic. It's a bit slower but a bit safer, whichever method you think works for you, but eventually you'll get it down where you can kill Nex pretty fast, just like this. So that is it. That is how to kill Nex, all the phases. I'm going to go over a few advanced tips real fast. So we do have the snipe tip that I talked about earlier on the blood phase, where if you time the snipe just right to when Nex's arms just come up, you can end up sniping her right as the phase starts and get some quick damage in. So that's something I like to use on the blood phase. Something else you can also do on the blood phase to get some more damage in is when you have the minion killed from the shadow phase, Nex will not phase into the blood phase until you attack her. So something that you can do to get a little more damage in is once the minion is dead, you look at Nex, you click Nex with just an auto attack. So you don't use an ability, you just click Nex, and as soon as that auto attack, as soon as you see it go off, you snapshot. This will cause the auto attack to phase Nex, but the snapshot to also go through. This snapshot will carry over to the start of the blood phase, and this will kind of give you a little starting damage of around 8 to 10k to start off the blood phase to kind of make it a little bit easier if you're having trouble DPSing. So this is like pre-phasing before the blood phase. The timing can be a little tricky to get down, but if you're having trouble, it can be worth doing. And finally, I just want to show a map of all the minions so you can see the arena where every minion is located and stuff like that. It's pretty simple, just square you go around in, but just in case you wanted to see where each of these things happen, I will put that on screen too so you can pause and look it over. So I hope this guide helped you out. I know it's a bit long, but I like to try to, show step-by-step scenarios and showing me, doing each phase while also teaching you about the mechanics. So my boss guides tend to be a little longer, but you can skip to any part that you want if you want to just skip to a certain phase. All the timestamps will be in the description and in the pinned comment, so you can, look for the exact part you want. If this helped you out, make sure to leave a like. If you want more boss guides, more RuneScape 3 videos, you can subscribe if you'd like. And yeah, thank you guys for watching. I hope you get your next skills. If you have any questions for me, feel free to let me know in the comments and I'll try to respond. And yeah, I'll see you all in the next video.